This is actually the first time that I've been able to talk about this here on My Nation. Because I started running in COVID, the thought of the nation in particular was we were extremely vulnerable. Our government was sending body bags to reservations rather than masks and other supplies. Like, we were just getting body bags.
Like many indigenous communities, our land base is very broad and transportation is still a major concern.
Often the precincts are an hour away from each other in tribal communities.
When I first registered my husband in the state elections, one of the questions that was asked on the application, they needed a physical address. It was really hard because we don't have street addresses on our village.
Polling sites would not allow tribal identification as a valid form. To many tribal leaders and to many tribal members, it was a slap in the face.
In Arizona, the stakes are high and the margins are small.
Arizona is such a crucial state for Natives, with 22 Native American reservations covering 28% of the state's land.
In Arizona, there are about 300,000 voting age eligible Native Americans, and the races in Arizona are incredibly tight.
Chris Mays narrowly defeats Republican Abe Hamadeh in one of the closest races in state history.
The Native American vote made up those margins in those very competitive races.
Clearly, Native Americans have the power to influence outcomes in Arizona.
To grasp the voting obstacles faced by Native people in Arizona, you have to look into the historical injustices they have endured over time.
The treatment that we received in school, in local towns, at the polls, unfortunately, you're just numb.
In 1924, Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act. But even at that late date, citizenship did not come with the right to vote.
Even after 1924, there were challenges to Native voting as well. I mean, for the Gila River Indian community, we have two revered past leaders, Rudolph Johnson and Peter Porter, that actually started this legal fight.
In a case called Porter v. Hall.
But the state Supreme Court in 1928 declared that Native Americans who were still connected to their tribes were incompetent to vote.
So this is a clearly racist decision, and it stood for 20 more years.
Porter wasn't overturned until 1948, when two Native American World War II veterans sued for their right to register to vote in a case called Harrison v. Levine.
That was the first time in Arizona that a right was recognized for Native Americans to vote.
But in the aftermath of the Harrison decision, Arizona continued to deploy tools like literacy tests to deny Native Americans the right to vote.
That was crafted by design to deny Native Americans the political power that they have.
Meaningful enforcement of Native American voting rights wasn't available until the 1960s and 70s, when the civil rights movement achieved the passage of the Voting Rights Act and its amendments.
Arizona was subjected to what was called pre-clearance. And pre-clearance was they couldn't pass laws unless the DOJ found that they were not discriminatory.
Pre-clearance prevented Arizona from enacting discriminatory voting policies until, in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court's devastating decision in Shelby County v. Holder ended pre-clearance.
After Shelby was decided, new voter suppression laws were passed across the country, including in Arizona.
Arizona was able to make discriminatory changes to election administration that it was unable to implement under pre-clearance.
One of the early voting sites that was specifically serving the Pasquayaqui tribe was closed, and the tribe asked to have it reinstated.
Rather than spend the few $1,000s to open up an early voting location, the county spent over $180,000 in defense of that denial.
It wasn't until I took office that we reinstated that location.
Immediately after Shelby County, the Arizona legislature moved forward with discriminatory voting restrictions on out-of-precinct voting and ballot collection.
What happens across Indian country is people pick up and drop off mail for each other. That will often include ballots. Access to a post office can be 20, 30, 40, 50 miles away, and often the infrastructure is lacking. That's a significant cost And that can be something that impoverished Native Americans have difficulty expending those resources.
And so what people on the reservations do is they come together as a community and think about who can be the person to collect the seniors' ballots, people with disabilities, people who have to work or have to take care of family members.
So these kind of distances make it incredibly difficult to cast a ballot in Arizona.
In 2021, Arizona's restriction on out-of-precinct voting and ballot collection became the subject of the Supreme Court's next big blow to the Voting Rights Act in a case called Brnovich v. DNC.
And what was especially egregious about that case is the court said that if the impact was small enough on the affected minority group, then that discrimination could occur. I don't think any discrimination is okay.
It's outrageous in a state where the margins of victory in critical elections are so small and where our Native communities are continuously fighting to be heard.
Shelby County and Brnovich have created an environment where legislators feel emboldened to enact voting laws that disproportionately depress the Native American vote.
So we responded to that moment. At NARF, we created the Native American Voting Rights Coalition. We were brought together to bring testimony directly about the impacts of voting on Indian country and how that difficulty is being exploited and expounded upon in America today.
In 2022, Arizona legislators passed House Bill 2492.
And that case involved state legislation that was passed that made a number of changes to the voter registration process. Buried in one of those laws was a short provision that said in order to register to vote, people needed to provide documentary proof of the location of their residence. And I grew up on the reservation, and when we would try to describe the location of our homes, we'd say 3 miles past mile marker 10 on the Trading Post Road, look for the crooked sagebrush. It's the way we talk in our community, but we don't have documents that prove the location of our home.
NARF joined with the Gila River community, the Tohono O'odham Nation, and 3 Native youth to challenge the residential location requirement.
Early on at the summary judgment, we got a win in that case, a really great outcome for our clients and for tribal people across Arizona.
Arizona has been ground zero for many of the outgoing fights to defend Native American rights and Native futures.
There are major issues at stake in the upcoming election. For Native people, the issues at stake are really about our existence, our safety, and our future.
We deserve a say.
Gokatak in our language translates to strength and power. How we translate Gokatak in voting is to ensure that they understand the power of our vote.
Making it easier for people to participate means we're going to have a much more reflective outcome that looks like the people we're trying to serve.
As a great-grandmother, my hope is that voting for him will be easier.
When I think about the reservation and my life there as a kid, it's a time and a place that I really yearn for because I spent that time with really formative people in my life teaching me what it meant to be Navajo.
As Native Americans, substantial rights under the Constitution and laws of this country were going unenforced.
Those traumas show up in our elders throughout our lives, throughout our parents' lives.
A lot of the history is still impacting us to this day.
There's something really powerful that happens when you articulate an injustice. And at NARF, we do that on all fronts.
The Native American Rights Fund is the oldest and largest nonprofit law firm.
Fighting alongside our tribal communities to defend Native American rights, access to our sacred spaces, our religions and spiritual practices, and to defend our rights to vote.
NARF arose out of the time during the Civil Rights era.
Black Americans had lawyers represented by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Several of us started thinking that's what we need to do for our Native American people. And it started changing things across the country with our Indian people.
Anytime Native American voters are in a position to swing elections, that's when you see the most egregious violations of their voting rights.
Without voting, every other right in Indian country that matters falls.
So it's really important to have NARF standing with our tribal people to define voting as part of the fight for tribal sovereignty.
All of the various structural barriers, we just didn't realize how many are still there to this day.
Here in North Dakota, we've had a history of denial of votes, racial bloc voting, gerrymandering, things of that nature.
Historically, we've had so much of our identity and culture disrespected and taken away from us.
There are still challenges to water rights, still challenges to tribal sovereignty, and every vote is fundamental to that.
It's important for us to have that voice here, to be that voice for the future.
Voting is important to stand up to the injustices that we as Native people and Native America have faced.
And they're trying to say that we don't have the right to even fight back. That's wrong. So we're going to stand up every single time.
We have to make sure that every Native American can vote and have the ability to effectuate change in their communities. I think that's the way that we collectively move forward.
If we want our stories to be told, we're going to have to tell our own stories. We know what we need, and we just need to be a part of it.
I believe democracy is a living thing. I believe that if we do not put in and be a part of the democracy, that it will fail us.
The native vote has the power to impact elections.
Because it's important, because it makes change, and we've seen that change. In all of the states we work in, Montana, North Dakota, Arizona, Alaska, South Dakota, the native vote is powerful.
When our ballot box achieves justice for Native people, that's when we as a country can really feel faith in our institutions.